Ladies and gentlemen, we begin this urgent update with the absolute economic suffocation of the Iranian people. As of March 12, 2026, the subsurface reality is that the Iranian regime has officially entered a state of financial cannibalism. Yesterday, hundreds of thousands of Iranians woke up to find their entire life savings evaporated, not by bombs, but by the digital seizure of their own banks. ATMs across Tehran are down, banking websites are blocked, and branches of Bank SEPA and Bank Melli have been shuttered without warning. The subsurface reality is that the regime is robbing its citizens blind to fund its final stand, freezing enormous sums of private capital to pay the only people left who can keep them in power, the IRGC and the besieged forces. The danger for the Iranian public is the deceptive labeling of this collapse. While the Central Bank of Iran claims this is merely a technical upgrade to communication switches, the subsurface reality is that the banking system is in terminal cardiac arrest. Customers of the nation's largest lenders received cryptic SMS messages locking their accounts for network stability. Yet the truth is that the regime has run out of physical cash. As the rial plunged to a record low of 1,500,000 per dollar in January, the subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the state is now liquidating its own population to bridge a $5 billion debt hole left by decades of corruption and the catastrophic failure of elite-led Ponzi schemes.
The strategic significance of this bank freeze is the total destruction of public trust.
For years, the Iranian elite, led by figures like Ali Ansari, have used the banking sector as a private piggy bank for their own European property empires. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the poison has finally reached the heart of the state-owned lenders. By merging the failed Ayande Bank into Bank Melli last year, the regime effectively infected the entire national economy with billions in bad debt. Now, with the coalition's air campaign pounding the military-industrial complex, the regime has abandoned all pretense of economic management, choosing to strip mine the private wealth of its citizens to ensure the survival of the bunker. The chain of consequences leads to an existential crisis of loyalty. As ordinary Iranians find they cannot even buy 8 individual eggs with their monthly salary, the realization is setting in that their government is their primary financial predator. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the January protests, which saw the regime slaughter up to 36,000 people, were just a preview of the economic rage that is now building when a government freezes the money of its people while its leaders hide in hospitals and bunkers. It has lost the moral right to exist. The banking collapse is not a technical glitch. It is the final siren for a regime that has bankrupted its nation to build a fortress of glass and marble that is now turning to dust. Ladies and gentlemen, we now analyze the anatomy of the heist that brought the Iranian economy to its knees. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the current banking collapse can be traced directly back to one man, Ali Ansari. This billionaire businessman, a close confidant of the new supreme leader Mojtaba Khamenei, is the front man who funneled hundreds of millions of dollars into European luxury properties while his domestic empire was built on a national-scale Ponzi scheme. From $150 million in London real estate to luxury hotels in Frankfurt, Ansari's global portfolio was built on the backs of 7 million Iranian depositors who trusted his Ayande Bank with their life savings. The danger of this elite corruption was hidden behind the imperial glamour of the world's largest shopping mall. The subsurface reality is that Ansari used Ayande Bank to give himself massive illegal loans to build Iran Mall, a colossal structure twice the size of the Pentagon. While ordinary Iranians were struggling to survive on a devalued currency, Ansari was building a city of marble based on 16th century Persian palaces. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that 70% of the bank's lending went to this single project, exceeding legal limits by over 1,000-fold. When the mall failed to attract brands and the bank collapsed, the regime didn't arrest Ansari. They bailed him out by printing more money and merging his toxic debt into the state-owned Bank Melli. The strategic significance of this cronyism is the absolute hypocrisy of the regime's narrative. For decades, Tehran has blamed every economic failure on Western sanctions, but the subsurface reality revealed by the Ayande Bank scandal is a homegrown rot. Sanctions didn't force Ali Ansari to build a 2 million square meter mall while the population starved. Corrupt patronage did. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the regime prioritizes the offshore oxygen of its elite over the stability of its own currency. By allowing Ansari to walk free while freezing the accounts of millions of ordinary citizens, the Khamenei dynasty has proven that its true axis is one of self-interest and financial theft. The chain of consequences leads to the total contagion of the Iranian financial system. By merging Ansari's Ponzi bank into Bank Melli, the government effectively spread the debt virus to every corner of the country. The subsurface reality is that the freezes we are seeing today at Bank Sepah and Bank Melli are the final gasp of an economy that has run out of bailout printing. As the UAE prepares to freeze billions in Iranian elite assets, the safety net for men like Ansari is vanishing. In the year 2026, the Iranian people are waking up to the truth. The easiest way to rob a bank is to own it. And the easiest way to rob a nation is to lead it under the guise of revolutionary purity. Ladies and gentlemen, we now analyze the leadership void that has transformed the Islamic Republic into a headless state. As of March 12, 2026, the subsurface reality is that the newly appointed supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has completely vanished from the public eye. Despite a highly publicized announcement by Iranian state television that he would deliver a live address to the nation, the broadcast was abruptly canceled without explanation. The subsurface reality is that there was no speech, no televised appearance, and no rescheduled time, only an eerie silence from the IRIB. This invisible debut has fueled widespread rumors that the regime is attempting to hide a dead leader or one so severely incapacitated that he cannot even record a 10-second video message to prove his existence. The danger for the regime lies in the graphic evidence of their own desperation. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that instead of a living leader, State TV displayed a portrait of Mojtaba Khamenei decorated in a style traditionally reserved for the deceased. Observers have noted that the display resembled a funeral portrait rather than a coronation image. Compounding this, unverified but persistent reports from Sina Hospital in Tehran suggest that Mojtaba is currently on a ventilator, suffering from severe abdominal and leg injuries sustained during the initial February 28 decapitation strikes. The subsurface reality is that if the new supreme leader is unconscious or in a coma, he is functionally unable to fulfill his role as commander-in-chief during the most intense day of strikes in Iranian history. The strategic significance of this ghost leadership is the fracturing of the command structure. While Mojtaba remains in a shadow, the subsurface reality is that Ali Larijani, the veteran power broker and secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, has emerged as the real power coordinating the military response. However, Larijani lacks the religious legitimacy of a supreme leader, creating a political quagmire as the coalition's air campaign intensifies. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the Assembly of Experts may have voted for a headless figurehead simply to project a semblance of stability, while the actual governance of the country has been seized by a desperate council of insiders and security officials. The chain of consequences leads to an existential crisis of loyalty within the IRGC. If the leader is on a ventilator and cannot lead, the subsurface reality is that the axis of resistance is effectively ownerless. While the Iranian president Masoud Pezeshkian has reportedly visited with the hospital, his own government admits they have not spoken with the younger Khamenei since his appointment. In the year 2026, the million-man myth has been replaced by a medical emergency. The regime's attempt to project a hereditary succession has resulted in a leader who is invisible at best and deceased at worst, leaving the Iranian state to drift into the shock and awe of the coming hours without a pilot at the helm. Ladies and gentlemen, we now analyze the financial hostage-taking currently unfolding across the Iranian heartland. As of March 12, 2026, the subsurface reality is that the freezing of accounts at Bank Melli and Bank Sepah is not a technical glitch, but a sovereign robbery. The regime is systematically locking down civilian capital to redirect billions of rials toward the only people who can ensure its immediate survival, the IRGC and the internal security forces. The subsurface reality is that the state-owned Bank Sepah, responsible for paying military salaries, saw its data center hit by a strike in Tehran yesterday. This has created a lethal cash crunch where the regime must now strip mine the savings of ordinary Iranians to prevent a mutiny among its own soldiers. The danger for the Iranian people is the deceptive labeling of this economic death spiral. While the regime blames sanctions for every ill, the subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that this collapse was manufactured by corruption. The bank accounts being frozen today are the same ones infected by the $5 billion bad debt of Ali Ansari's Allende Bank last year. When Ansari's Imperial Mall Ponzi scheme failed, the central bank printed so much money to cover the loss that it triggered the massive inflation that sparked the January protests. The subsurface reality is that the poison has now fully metastasized, and the regime is forcing its citizens to pay the bill for its elite's luxury lifestyle and military failures. The strategic significance of this economic cannibalism is the total erosion of the social contract. When a government freezes the money of its people while its leaders hide in bunkers, it has lost the moral right to govern. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the January massacre, which saw up to 36,000 people killed, was not enough to hold the line. The regime must now starve the population to maintain the loyalty of the Basij enforcers. However, as the UAE considers freezing the offshore oxygen of the Iranian elite in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, the regime's safety net is vanishing. In the year 2026, the shadow economy that sustained the Khamenei dynasty is being dismantled by its own greed and the coalition's kinetic precision. The chain of consequences leads to an irreversible banking contagion. By merging the toxic waste of Allende Bank into Bank Melli, the government has ensured that the entire financial system will sink together. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the 5 million reals to the dollar exchange rate is just the beginning of a total monetary evaporation. As the sledgehammer of the B-52 continues to level the centers of power, the Iranian people are realizing that their government is their primary financial predator. The mullah regime is toast, and as the banks go dark and the leader remains on a ventilator, the Islamic Republic is finally running out of time to pay its debt to the people it has betrayed. Ladies and gentlemen, we now analyze the institutional autopilot keeping the Iranian war machine functioning while its figurehead remains in a medical coma. As of March 12, 2026, the subsurface reality is that real power in Tehran has consolidated behind Ali Larijani, the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. While the IRGC forced through the ghost coronation of a wounded Mojtaba Khamenei to project stability, the subsurface reality is that Larijani is the pragmatic architect actually coordinating the military response. On Wednesday, Larijani personally appeared on national television to vow vengeance, even issuing a veiled threat to President Trump to be careful not to get eliminated. This is a regency in all but name where a veteran power broker is managing a million-man army, while the supreme leader is reportedly fighting for his life on a ventilator at Sina Hospital. The danger for the Iranian state is the fracture of the command nervous system. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the IRGC is now effectively running the country as a parallel government, utilizing Larijani's bureaucratic experience to bypass the civilian leadership. While President Pezeshkian and the Interim Leadership Council are technically the constitutional heads of state, the subsurface reality is that they have not spoken with Mojtaba since his appointment. The military strategy is now in a state of asymmetrical desperation, where Larijani and the second-tier IRGC commanders who replaced the generals killed in the initial strikes are making unilateral decisions to strike infrastructure across the Gulf. In the year 2026, the million-man myth has become a headless mob led by a shadow regency that answers to no one. The strategic significance of this Larijani regency is the total erasure of the clerical balance. For decades, Ali Khamenei maintained a delicate equilibrium between the military, the clergy, and the politicians. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that this balance is dead. By installing a cardboard cutout leader who cannot even record a video address, the IRGC has completed a military coup under the guise of religious succession. As of this morning, the subsurface reality is that the axis of resistance is taking orders from a fragmented council of hardliners who are watching Donald Trump tie himself in knots while they maximize the economic cost of the war on their own neighbors. The chain of consequences leads to an acute crisis of legitimacy. Opposition groups and even some figures within the clerical establishment in Qom have denounced the new leadership as a disgraceful IRGC puppet show. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the succession crisis is being masked by wartime propaganda, but the vacuum at the top is undeniable. As the coalition continues its most intense day of strikes, the question is not whether the regime can survive the bombs, but whether the Shadow Regency can survive the total economic evaporation of the country. In the year 2026, the Islamic Republic is a ship without a captain, steered by a pragmatic power broker who is presiding over the final hours of a 47-year-old illusion. Ladies and gentlemen, we now analyze the internal liquidations being executed as the coalition shifts its focus toward the regime's final pillar, its domestic security apparatus. As of March 12, 2026, the subsurface reality is that the air supremacy achieved by the United States and Israel is being used to dismantle the very forces that keep the Iranian people in chains. In the last 24 hours, over 170 precision-guided munitions have targeted the Greater Tehran Law Enforcement Relief Unit and multiple Basij command hubs. The subsurface reality is that this is a reactive targeting strategy designed to ensure that while the brain of the army is dead, the hands of the regime's internal repression are also cut off. The danger for the IRGC is the autopilot vulnerability of their current defense. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the Iranian military is operating on a preset strategy with no one at the helm to provide authoritative guidance. While state media claims that Mojtaba Khamenei is providing direct permission for strikes, the subsurface reality is that the wartime machinery is simply running on momentum. The coalition is exploiting this leadership blackout by striking the upstream centers of gravity, the one-way drone factories and missile assembly lines before they can even be activated. For the Basij enforcers in the streets, the subsurface reality is a total loss of support, as their command centers in Isfahan and Tehran are reduced to ash by sensors perfected on drug traffickers. The strategic significance of this phase is the moral collapse of the security state. When the very buildings used to coordinate the January massacre are wiped off the map, the subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the regime's aura of invincibility is replaced by absolute vulnerability. Iranian state TV's failure to provide even a single photograph of the new leader has confirmed to the security forces that they are fighting for a ghost. The subsurface reality is that as the sledgehammer of the B-52 continues to fall, the internal security apparatus is beginning to fracture and flee, with some units reportedly abandoning their posts to avoid being caught in the total air dominance envelope of the coalition. The chain of consequences leads to a managed termination of the regime's power projection. By systematically neutralizing the domestic security core, the coalition is clearing the path for the Iranian people to reclaim their country. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the million-man mob is no longer a security force. It is a target gallery for refined intelligence and brutal efficiency. As the shadow of the B-2 grows longer over the remnants of the IRGC command hubs, the message to the Mueller regime is undeniable. The autopilot war is coming to a crashing halt, and the final stop is the total evaporation of the 1979 system. Ladies and gentlemen, we now analyze the financial cauterization of the regime's offshore lifeline. As of March 12, 2026, the subsurface reality is that the international community has moved to dismantle the financial oxygen of the Khamenei dynasty by targeting its primary architect. Ali Ansari, the co-founder of the collapsed Allende Bank and a central figure in the IRGC's funding network, is now the subject of a global asset seizure. The subsurface reality is that Ansari, who built a 400 million euro European property empire while his bank at home was functioning as a national Ponzi scheme, is now watching his luxury assets, from a golf resort in Mallorca to a ski hotel in Austria, be frozen by Western authorities. The danger for the remnant regime lies in the total exposure of their shell companies. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the UK government has officially frozen Ansari's London portfolio, valued at over £150 million. This includes 12 mansions on Billionaires Row and high-end hotels in Frankfurt. For the Iranian people who were robbed of their savings when Allende Bank was forced into a toxic merger with Bank Melli, the subsurface reality is a galling hypocrisy. While citizens cannot afford 8 eggs with their monthly salary, the regime's favorite banker was building a city of marble in Tehran, the Iran Mall, using loans stolen directly from the public. The strategic significance of this economic decapitation is the bankruptcy of the IRGC's private treasury. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the UAE is now weighing a multi-billion-dollar freeze on Iranian assets held in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. By cutting off these offshore safe havens, the coalition is ensuring that the Mullah regime cannot pay the very security forces it depends on for survival. The January massacre was funded by the strip mining of the Iranian economy. Now the Ansari protocol is ensuring that the money being used to suppress the population is being seized and held in international escrow. The chain of consequences leads to an irreversible banking contagion. As the state-owned Bank Melli and Bank Seppa freeze all civilian accounts today, the subsurface reality is that the regime has officially run out of cash. By merging the debt of Ansari's failed mall city into the national banking system, they have ensured that the entire economy will sink as one. In the year 2026, the shadow economy of the Khamenei family is being dismantled by its own corruption. The Mullah regime is toast. And as the banks go dark and the oligarchs flee, the Iranian people are realizing that their government was never a shield, but a parasite that has finally consumed its host. Ladies and gentlemen, we conclude this investigation by analyzing the existential silence at the heart of the Iranian state. As of March 12, 2026, the subsurface reality is that the newly appointed supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, is a leader in name only. Following the eerie cancellation of his live national address, state television has begun referring to him as a janbaz, a wounded veteran fueling rumors that he is currently on a ventilator at Sinai Hospital. The subsurface reality is that he sustained severe abdominal and leg injuries during the initial February 28 decapitation strikes. If the leader of the million-man army is unconscious, the strategic brain of the 1979 system has effectively flatlined. The danger for the remnant regime is the total vacuum of authority during the most intense day of strikes in the conflict. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the Assembly of Experts may have appointed a ghost simply to project a facade of continuity. While Iranian President Pezeshkian remains in the public eye, he has reportedly admitted that neither he nor his government has spoken with the younger Khamenei since his hereditary coronation on Sunday. This autopilot war is being run by a fragmented council of hardliners who are watching the world burn from their own bunkers, while their supreme leader is reportedly fighting for his life in a highly secure ICU. The strategic significance of this leadership blackout is the moral death of the regime. When a government freezes the bank accounts of its people while its leader remains invisible or deceased, the social contract is not just broken, it is evaporated. The subsurface reality of March 12, 2026 is that the 40-year illusion of the Ayatollahs has reached its final breath. President Trump's target number one doctrine has ensured that no successor can feel safe, even in a hospital bed. The shock and awe has been a modern-day Berlin Wall moment, where the psychological barrier of the Revolutionary Guard's invincibility has turned to rubble alongside the drone factories and command centers. The final problem for the shadow monarch in the bunker is that the Venezuela Formula is no longer just a theory. It is the only lethal off-ramp remaining. As of March 12, 2026, the wake-up call to the world is complete. The era of the Islamic Republic is ending, and the headless body of its army is being replaced by the living spirit of a people ready to reclaim their country. The war is very complete, and as the tornadoes of air power continue to spin over Tehran, the Islamic Republic is finally running out of sky. The future belongs to those who choose the great and acceptable path, leaving the million-man myth where it belongs, in the medical archives of a failed revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where our program comes to a pause. Please leave your thoughts in the comments so we can continue the discussion together. And if this is your first time watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive the earliest notifications of our upcoming videos. Goodbye, and see you again soon.